Has anyone ever said this to you before? What is that? A real tattoo? Tattoos are permanent, you know? That's such a commitment. How could you make up your mind on something that'll stay on your body forever? I'm sure my fellow tattooed friends would understand how that feels. To be called out on a commitment you chose to get for yourself. You get one, then maybe another, or maybe you have so many that your first tattoos have been covered up multiple times. That's why I feel that many people, including myself, tend to cover up their skin in certain situations. Maybe you're very open to showing your tattoos in public, with your friends, your coworkers even, but how about with your family? I guess that depends on where you're from, perhaps how old you are, where you've lived, or even where you've traveled in the world. As a Taiwanese-born Canadian, I've definitely felt the weight of tattoos around family. Almost like I'm hyper-conscious when I'm wearing anything sleeveless, constantly wondering at what point will I have to tell them that, yes, that's a real tattoo. You know, it took me a whole 3 months to tell my parents about my first tattoo. That was how nerve-wracking it was. My mom didn't make a big deal out of it. However, my dad wasn't as forgiving. Since it was only the first one, they didn't scold me as much as I thought, because I got the feeling they assumed it'd be the only one. By the time I had 5 or 6, my grandma saw them for the first time. She told me, "You've ruined your skin." Hearing that made me feel like I was carrying a mistake everywhere I went, like this burden only got heavier and heavier with every new tattoo. And you know, these negative implications don't come out of nowhere as they are attached to tattooing's history. We know this, yet still judge people who have them when the medium has changed and grown so much from its past. More than just service providers, tattoo artists are artists first. Their perspective of the industry is one that should be heard and not overlooked because they've been associated with a bad reputation. Ultimately, they're individuals with a professional art practice, with work that should be treated with as much respect as any other art form. This is so prevalent because I realized, even though I'm living in Canada, I had subconsciously covered my tattoos around my parents because of this impression I built up in my head of tattooing being a terrible taboo in Asian culture, and in some cases, even in Western culture. And you know, I got a better sense of what that felt like earlier this year. Back in January, I went to Mexico with my whole family. I didn't get many souvenirs, but what I did come back with was a new tattoo. It was while walking down Fifth Avenue that I decided to peek into a tattoo parlor with my mom just to check out their work. Of course, I ended up getting a walk-in tattoo. To my surprise, though, my dad ended up coming to watch the whole process too, when it was he and my grandmother who seriously criticized them the most. This was actually the first time both my parents had ever seen tattooing work in action. The artist in the studio offered me some tequila, to which I declined, and even joked that my dad needed the alcohol more than I did. I figured they only said that because he was hovering behind me with his arms crossed, watching as Ben prepared to stab away at my arm. Benjamin was the artist that helped me. Even with a language barrier between us, he tried to create the best experience for me. I chose to get tattooed on my arm the symbol Chitam from the Mayan calendar, which in Mayan means the time period my birthday falls in. As he prepared to, in my dad's eyes, devalue me, and in Ben's, offer a meaningful part of Mexican culture, I fell amidst it all and just tried to enjoy the whole experience. I got to choose the music playing in the studio and even got to share my tattoos with fellow artists who are also in the studio. I didn't speak a word of Spanish, and they only knew bits and pieces of English, but through showing the art from our different cultures, we were able to communicate with one another. What I took away from it was ultimately a great tattoo experience in Mexico, but what I got out of it was an even more disappointed father. For the rest of the day, he barely spoke to me, adding to the fact that I've ruined my skin on top of questions like, why would you decide to get permanent ink on your skin? What if you change your mind in a couple of years? You're going to regret it. I think the worst part was when I heard that my dad was upset because he says I'm affecting my younger sisters negatively and setting a bad example for them. My sisters don't really see it, though. Every time my dad mentions anything along the lines of my actions affecting theirs, they would simply reply that they're their own person and that I have zero influence in their decisions. But I know in some way I do, and I see it. By bearing my tattoos in front of my sisters opens the door for them to be able to have them too. And I think that's what they're most afraid of. I don't think they imagine their 4 daughters to grow up to be fully tatted freelance artists. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but to them, they need me to be a better role model to follow. However, if I'm following my own path in life and doing the things I want to pursue and love to do, then how is that not setting a good role model, being a good role model to follow? Does having tattoos degrade me? Now this brings me to my parents' homeland, Taiwan, where it's almost frowned upon to have tattoos on your body. I was 16 when I last saw my grandpa there. I'm 20 now, and I can say that my appearance has definitely changed. He's the guy who told me that my skin was too tan for boys to like me and that I wouldn't attract a good husband unless I had fair skin. If he saw me now, he'd say I look like a gang member and we'll never get married. I talked to my mom about my insecurities and asked if it was really a good idea for me to go back this summer, considering all the ink I've accumulated over the past couple years. And what she told me, I will never forget. She said to me, "What's the point of hiding your tattoos? Show them off. The more you hide them, the more they'll pry and criticize. If you're super excited to show them your tattoos, then who are they to bring you down? Maybe you'll even start a new trend in Taiwan." Now, this changed my way of thinking entirely, and so I don't let it bother me anymore. I don't let my tattoos define me, but instead accentuate my features, bring curiosity to my appearance, and open conversation with strangers. I think the experience in Mexico was a push in the right direction, a learning opportunity really for my parents, widening their view of the tattoo industry and making me a very proud and hopeful daughter. I've come to realize that their validation isn't necessary to prove my point. If I can't convince them, I can educate them. I can set an example and share my story, my experience, and my culture. And that's more than enough validation for me. Thank you.